for not being able to be here. He's actually in his role as the co-chair of the North Country Economic Development Council, which is holding a public forum similar to this in Plattsburgh, so he apologizes. My name is Marilyn Ardito. I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources at Clarkson. I would also like to welcome you to the campus. Let me do a few housekeeping things first. In the event of an emergency, there are exits on either side of the stage. There are 2 in the back. If you're sitting in the balcony, there are also exits in the back. If you need to use the elevator, you go out the doors that you came in and make a right, and the elevator is on the left-hand side of the hall. In a few minutes, when I turn this meeting over to Mayor Tischler and the board, I would like you to understand that the board and the mayor are hosting this event, and Clarkson is very pleased to host it as an educational opportunity, but really, we do not take a view in terms of any comments made by the public, by the mayor, or by the board, but we're very excited to be able to welcome you to this public informational, educational opportunity and an opportunity for everyone to have a voice. So at this point, I'll turn it over to the mayor.
Thank you. Is that okay? Can anyone hear me? I'd like to open the public hearing for the Village of Potsdam at the Snell Hall Auditorium, Park Street, Potsdam, New York, September 12, 2011, 7 p.m. to receive public comments on the dissolution plan. I'd like to open the meeting with a roll call. Let the record show all board members are present. I'd like to read the legal notice as published. Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Potsdam, New York, on Monday, September 12, 2011 at 7 p.m. in the Snell Hall Auditorium, Park Street, Potsdam, New York. The purpose of the hearing is to receive public comment on the dissolution plan. By order of the Board of Trustees of the Incorporated Village of Potsdam, New York, Lori S. Kior, Village Clerk. Before we start with public comments, I'd like to, first of all, thank Clarkson for allowing us to be here this evening. And I'm sure we have quite a bit of room here for more people if they hopefully they'll show up. Due to the number of speakers that we have, I'd like to maybe try to limit the amount of time you have to 2 or 3 minutes. If you need more time, I will oblige, but try to keep it as brief as possible. Go to the podium, state your name and address, and if you would, please address the board. Do not engage in conversation or arguments with other citizens present, and make no personal attacks on anyone, board or otherwise. Again, this is a public hearing, the key word being hearing. We are here to listen. We are not going to engage in conversation, debate, answer questions. We need your feedback. This is a very, very important and a very sensitive issue for the village and the town, and anything that you can share with us would be appreciated. And also, just for information, this program will be rebroadcast tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. and Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. on WCKN Channel 30. And with that, we'll start with public comments. I will go through the list. Some folks have signed up. I'll go in order of signature, and after that, I'll open it up to people. When they raise their hands, you will be recognized. Our first speaker will be Glenn Seymour. Thank you. And Mr. Robert Wood, you're on deck.
Anyway, it works. To the village board and to the folks here, I appreciate the opportunity to come down and address you, and I frankly am not as well versed as a lot of people in this room. There are a couple of things. I was reviewing this briefly coming in. I guess my most significant concern, bar any, and I have to preface this with the fact that I need to say that my son is a village police officer, which may prejudicially sway me a little bit, but I was born and brought up in this area, and from the time I was a youngster, there were, in the good old days, interesting raucous events called beer blasts. And Ruth, you certainly are around long enough to remember that, and some of the older folks here know what it was like when the things got out of control. Saturday night, as I was laying there trying to sleep, and I had one house 2 houses up from me and a house the other side of the funeral home going through major parties, I thought to myself, this will be interesting if we dissolve the village, and where will the help come from when you want to kind of keep the lid on? I hope that you can guarantee the police officer changeover or the fire station management and the services, but until there's a real guaranteed in writing, ink-dried arrangement, I'm not so sure I'm real revved up on this dissolution, because I think we may sacrifice some services that the people in the village now have come to rely on. And I don't know if you can really put that to the definite paper and make it stick. So I'll be interested to see how that works. And there was another thought that I see here, that if the village does dissolve, you have rubbish services here. Somehow they're going to pick one person to carry, or one company to do all the town-wide rubbish removals. That's interesting, but it also discriminates against a lot of smaller operations that can't compete with Casello. So I kind of question how legitimate that is, and how honest it is, and how fair it is. I guess that's really all I need to say. I just hope that people give a real serious thought about what you may lose. I know it's expensive, believe me, I pay my taxes and then some. But I think that the services we're getting might change drastically if we do away with the village, and I really hate to see that personally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seymour. Mr. Wood?
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank you. What's Potsdam doing to compete with the rest of the world? The corollary to that is, what is critical mass to compete with the rest of the world? Another rhetorical question is the following, a question that my wife and I lost. That is, what are we doing to ensure that our children and grandchildren can find gainful employment and enjoy our beautiful area and way of life? A third rhetorical question, what is Potsdam? I was born in a foreign country. I became an American by choice. I became a resident of the village of Potsdam by choice. Some village residents say, we are different than the townies. Others say, the people in the town drive snowmobiles and hunt and fish, and they do any, they don't care about environmental laws. That's poppycock. And I'd use a stronger word. It's bullshit. It's a very slippery slope when you take an elitist view that you're better than somebody else. Some of the worst excesses in this country and others have been built on that very fact. Racial discrimination, ethnic discrimination. My forebears, some of them, Irish peasants, if you will, came from Vermont to the North Country. 2 of them are buried in the Southville Cemetery. They were driven out of this area by religious intolerance. My great-grandfather was a Roman Catholic, and my great-grandmother was a Methodist. Both families in the community couldn't stomach the fact that they were together. They went to Rouse's Point, and then they went to Flushing, Queens. There's no room for that kind of attitude in this community. What is Potsdam? Your rabbi, your imam, your minister, or your priest. They don't make a distinction between whether you live in the village of Potsdam or the town of Potsdam. You're one of their flock. My wife and I submitted a letter to the Dissolution Committee. And to the best of my knowledge, it was never responded to. What we said in that letter, and I should retreat just a little bit, to go back to what we're doing to compete with the rest. I lost my point. I got a little carried away, pardon me. What are we doing to compete with the rest of the world? We're not competing with Messina. We're not competing with Canton. We did that a long time ago. But God bless us. We had the people of Canton, those weird people who love the red, brown, and white, the St. Lawrence University women's hockey team. And God knows they love their teams. But they're very different than us. But they decided that it would be better off to have a hospital that included both Canton and Potsdam. You know what the result was? We've got the best hospital in St. Lawrence County. And those people in Canton were big enough to think that they could get along with the people in Potsdam, that they wouldn't lose out in anything, that hospital services and medical services would be applied equally. Well, God bless them. We got the best hospital in the county. My wife and I lost out. One daughter is 7 hours away in New Jersey. What a great state. The other daughter is 3 hours away in Burlington, Vermont. That's a reasonable commute. If we don't compete, if we don't get some economic development here, what chance do your children and your grandchildren have of staying here? How many building permits have been issued to build new homes in this community in the last 10 years? How many substantial clean energy, clean businesses have come into this community in the last 10 years? What have we done to bring them in?
Mr. Wood, excuse me, it's been 5 minutes. Could you wrap it up, please?
Certainly, and I petition the board to have an opportunity to speak again.
Depends on the interest of time.
The letter addressed to the Dissolution Board noted that there were two major reports, one by Attorney General at the time, Cuomo, about municipal consolidation and dissolution of small villages. The other was by the state comptroller, which I quote, "Local governments could save $750 million by sharing services." This board has known that all along. This board has not embraced real progress on consolidation of services. This board could have consolidated to the tax advantage of the citizenry, a reduction in outlays for justice courts. But for some reason, we can't do that. This board could have initiated real discussion on consolidation of the highway departments of both. We don't need fancy equipment for 2 highway departments. We could have 1 garage. I could go on, and hopefully with your assurance, I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, our next speaker is Miss Michelle Arnold. Thank you. And we have a Milton Grimsley.
Good evening. My name is Milton Grimsley. I live at 11 Grant Street. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address the board on this important matter. My wife and I moved here 13 years ago from New Hampshire, a place which has really high taxes. And one of the decisions we made at the time was, do we want to live outside the village in the town, or do we want to live inside the village in the town? And because of its proximity to SUNY Potsdam and to where my wife was working, had gotten a job, and because of the services that we got in the village and would not get if we were outside the village, and the shorter commute primarily and everything, we made the choice that we knew we were going to pay higher taxes in the village than we would if we were outside the village line. And I think that principle still holds. You know, it's not a bad bargain for me, because my wife is no longer here, to pay for the services I get. And I certainly don't want to see any of those services lost, and it would be unfair, I think, to maintain those services and require people outside the present village line to help pay for them if they don't get them. So I speak against dissolution. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a short list as far as sign-ins, so I will recognize anyone who wishes to speak.
My name is William Bebee. I live at 10.5 Leroy Street. If it please the board, this has been an eventful year for me. The small bequest of money left to me by my mother ran out. I failed to find a job. I may have some nibbles for some paintings I do. The open microphone series that some friends and I have been doing at the gazebo in Ives Park may move into Billy's Deli, no relation, the new delicatessen on Main Street for the winter season. And we might even get to pass the hat so the musicians get a little money. I think I said already I couldn't find a job, maybe not. I've gone back to school to learn honest work. So it's been an eventful year. I guess if I came here when I was 2, but if my math is right, just about this time of year, I'm finishing up my 51st year here in the village. There have been a few interruptions, but the vast preponderance of those years I've spent here. The theme I was trying to strike in telling something of my own experiences is that the binding thread among them is that they all are about dealing with being real broke. The country is dealing with being real broke. The state is dealing with being real broke. I won't go into arcane political analysis of it, but if it please the board, I don't think we really need to worry about competing with the rest of the world. These exhortations of that sort always remind me of what every team is saying at the beginning of their sports season. I think cooperating with the rest of the world, cooperative structures that minimize the profit motive and maximize working together and maintaining as many a localized economy, especially the agriculture. I think some people are familiar with the concept of a community getting all of its agricultural produce from a 100-mile radius around that community. I think a very good pairing of such localizing of agriculture and industry to the greatest degree is a kind of cultural cosmopolitanism with other centers of independent economic enterprise. And all of this doesn't have a lot to do with competition. Okay, that's my arcane idea. And I mention it because I think the best kind of political organization to administer that would be the smallest. And the Village of Potsdam has a couple of good hallmarks for being that institution, that political entity, in addition to its size. It has a comprehensive plan for long-term growth, as the town does not. It has what is prescribed for a vibrant community, which is a core business district surrounded by residential neighborhoods. And in the more far-flung elements of these ideas, beyond that, there is plenty of agricultural land for that 100-mile radius of agricultural supply. These are the kinds of ideas I think that are make for a sustainable future. I don't think that I'm an elitist. I don't think that people in the village have elitist ideas. I think they simply have an idea that the Village of Potsdam is a unique community and has a right to govern itself. As I understand it, the latest estimate or guesstimate is that on average, this dissolution would reduce property taxes a little under $3 per $1,000 of real property value. I pay about, let me see if I'm doing this right, I pay about $2,700. No, I'm sorry, the math isn't. Real property value, it wouldn't be a lot for me. It would be a savings, but it wouldn't be a lot. And I'm going to have to scrape. I may be very cold this winter. I may spend a lot of time in sweaters and under blankets this winter, and eating the specials at the IGA. You know, the IGA is owner-operated, and it's in the commercial core. And those are two reasons I shop at the IGA. You see, there are reasons for my strategies.
That's
Yes.
5 minutes. Wrap it up, please.
I'm sorry. It's my feeling that we, working together as a community, can meet the challenges of the coming years. I think the flexibility of a small community with a governing body which I feel has been very responsible in trying to seek consolidation of services. I think this community has the earmarks of success on it. And I'm scuffling to pay my taxes. And I live in the village, I own a house, and I am against dissolution. There's an integrity here and a culture and a will to work together to help one another. And I don't think we should schmutz with it. I don't think an influx of green businesses would appear in a villageless town. I think a bunch of sprawl development will in that agricultural space, which is part of a real formula for success. If one more sentence, we have a possibility of an agricultural, a commercial, and maybe even an industrial formula for success, but certainly a social and community formula for success. I thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Who wishes to speak next? Ma'am?
I'm Sally Elliott. I live on 5 Circle Drive. Tonight, when I came just to listen, and I just wrote a friend of mine a note that said I wasn't going to do this, but changed my mind. I realized this afternoon that I'm the 4th generation to have lived in the Village of Potsdam in my family. And so this process has been a real education for me. And I have to say, having looked at the material that was here tonight, I want to applaud the people who have worked on that report. And I think it has a lot of information for us to think about. I know that there are other states that don't have towns that are within villages, and I think we need to look at ways that we can be creative and combine services and look at what possibilities are out there if we do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Sir?
Good evening. My name is Tom Whitesell. I live in the Village of Potsdam. My family moved here about 15 years ago, the year before the ice storm. So I don't qualify as a North Country native who's been in the area for 100, 150 years, 5 generations. But I think my views on things are worth something. I've taken the opportunities to attend a number of town board meetings which centered around a specific community relevant issue. And I've done the same, attending a number of village board meetings, likewise, that centered around a specific community relevant issue. And my impression is that without judging anyone at all, it's not like that, that there are very different interests between the town outside people to some extent and the people who live in the village. I think that there's a long history in Potsdam of, in the village, of being centered around 2 universities, centers of learning, which has developed a certain sort of population, some of the professorial members of whom live outside of the village in the town. And of course, there's a long history of agriculture and forestry and so on. So there are different interest groups, which is good. I think that my impression is from attending these different board meetings that there's been a lot of contention between the 2 entities, if they need to be referred to as separate entities, a lot of personality conflict for decades, which I think is so unfortunate. And I don't see dissolving one of the entities as appropriate. I think that the appropriate choice to make is to continue to work toward working together, as Mr. Bebee suggests, and maintain our, a couple of years ago, a gentleman came to Potsdam who travels around the state addressing communities about the process of dissolving villages in New York State. And he said that overall, on average, it tends to be not necessarily a good thing. People are often, maybe more than 50% of the time, not very happy with the results. So to take what I think would be a profound historic step of dissolving the Village of Potsdam on a premise that it may result in good things, the grass may be greener if we take down some of the fences or something like that, is taking a big gamble. I don't think it's a good idea. I also have not seen much evidence that savings on taxes would be particularly significant for current residents of the village, or necessarily desirable for town outside residents. So I really question the appropriateness of taking such a step as dissolving the village.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who's next? Sir or ma'am? Ma'am, ladies first. Excuse me.
My name's Abby Lee. I live at 20 Chestnut Street in Potsdam. I think that a lot of the conversation has been centered on village good, town bad, village good. In the end, neither is better than the other. It's just very specific about what you want in your community. And I think by having a government that serves your particular interests, you are allowed to channel that desire, and you're willing to pay for the services, and you're willing to go forward and deal with what is. One of the issues that was brought up is that the town and the village are bickering all the time, and that's a good reason for dissolution. Having served on the village board, I think bickering actually can be good. It helps to represent the people that you're representing. In recreation, for example, the village was paying 66% of recreation costs. By bickering, it became 50%, a more equitable way for both the town and village residents. Bickering can be good because it basically says we have different interests, good or bad, they're different, and we're going to do it. So I guess what I'm saying is that when you throw the baby out with the bathwater, there's no going back. There are transitional steps. There are other ways to think about it. But at this point, I would caution people to think about what they're losing to get a conceived greater good. Bickering is good. It solves different issues. It represents different issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
I've heard of him before. He looks familiar. To the board, I vowed when I left village service that I would never come back and say anything in a public meeting. I violated that once, and I'm going to violate it again tonight. 25 years ago, there were significant differences between the village and the town of Potsdam, particularly as it related to support of the joint recreational program. The two boards were able to sit down to converse civilly. They had profound differences. They worked them out. They came up with a more equitable support system for the town and the village. The town highway department started to assist the village when we were doing paving in the village streets by lending us their equipment and their manpower. The village was paying for the materials. That continues to this day. We did not get into discussions about the court at that time, and that may be a sticking point at the present time. You can make things happen if you sit down with goodwill and talk about the issues and resolve them with a dirty word in American politics today, compromise. And that's exactly what can happen, in my view, should happen. Now we'll talk about two other things. One, I live at 37 Main Street, right across from the fire station. We affectionately refer to that as the war zone. About 1,000 of my best friends go under my window at 11 o'clock going downtown and come back under that window at 2:30 in the morning, spreading styrofoam containers, paper plates, hiding half-filled beverage containers in the bushes in the front of our house, vandalizing a couple of times. We had a ketchup bottle thrown through our front window that went the full length of the living room, crashed against the far wall. We had our steps pulled out and the spindles kicked out of the steps, and the steps were left 15 inches out from the front door. If one of us had gone out to get the mail and stepped in to that void, I don't know what could have happened. I built what I considered very nice trellis for flowers on the side of our house on the Division Street side. The very next night, it was torn down, broken against two telephone poles down the street. If I thought that we had to continue to live without having access to a police presence in this community that could respond within minutes of being called, then I would be very concerned. I do not have a very comfortable feeling that we would be able to continue that kind of police service. If it takes an act of the state legislature to create a police district, I'm sorry, in my humble view, I don't believe that's going to happen in the present attitude we see coming from Albany. And I would not want to depend on the sheriff or the state police coming from half or two-thirds away across the county to respond to the difficulties that our police department faces every night of the week, particularly on the weekend evenings. And they aren't always there exactly when you want them, but they are there. So, to me, the difficulties that we have in trying to cooperate and coordinate our efforts between the village and the town can be resolved by much less drastic measures than dissolution of the village. If I thought that everything would go smoothly, and at the very beginning of this process, I favored slightly dissolution. As it developed and the facts became known to me, I've changed my mind. I do not think it is in the best interest of either the village or the town to dissolve the Village of Potsdam. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Sir?
My name is Dan Bradford. My wife and I live at 25 Garden Street. We've been here just about 27 years. I joined the long list of speakers who promised people that they wouldn't speak and have broken the promise. There are a few things that I want to say. Starting right off from the top, I do not favor dissolution. My wife and I moved here from out of state and moved from a place where there were relatively few publicly provided services to Potsdam, where there were a lot. And I cannot tell you how happy we were to be able to move to a place where we paid our taxes and services were provided. And I'm happy to pay those taxes, and I'm happy for those services. And I think that if we actually looked at it, we would realize that we're getting a very good bargain. And that's one reason I want to sustain it. The second is actually an oddity. When I looked at the figures, I noticed that if the dissolution goes forward, although the village taxes go down a bit, the village of Norwood's taxes go up a bit or more. And what strikes me about that is not simply the issue of whether our advantage is someone else's loss, but the larger issue that if we do a dissolution like this, it does throw into motion a whole series of possible changes throughout the area. And my own feeling is that if we're going to make those kinds of changes, I would be much happier if they were worked out on a large scale with careful thought and planning between all of the venues, all of the areas, all of the villages, all of the towns, rather than each group or one group going first and saying, well, we get ours, you get the short end of the stick, and then let everybody else work their way out. I think that way ultimately won't benefit the area as a whole. And to go back to the point that Rob Wood made at the very beginning, if we want to secure a future for our children or for the area as a whole, I think it has to be done on a larger scale basis than just the village or indeed just the town. and that everybody needs to be working together rather than simply looking out for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Sir?
My name is Ed Hanlon. I live on Sealy Drive. I feel like I'm at an AA meeting of some sort. Because I too have to confess to my wife, I am sorry. I promised I would not open my big mouth as usual. First, I'd like to thank the village board. This is an excellent exercise in democracy. This is what democracy is about. The people who are here, this also is what democracy is about. I wrote a letter not long ago to the Watertown paper saying that dissolution is not what democracy is about. I read somewhere that taxes in Norwood, taxes outside of the village could rise up to 200%. Well, I don't know that that's true. I don't know that's true at all. May not rise very much at all. But the point is that we who live in the village get to decide to raise someone else's taxes. Hardly seems fair at all. The people whose taxes get to go up because we decide do not get to say, no, we don't want our taxes to go up. Someone point out to me where that's a good thing. To me, that probably is the core issue in dissolution. Now, I'm someone who, when this whole thing began, was in favor of doing away with a layer of government. Oh, I have a few layers of government I'd like to see us do away with. Let's see, Washington, D.C., St. Lawrence County, a number of layers of government, because I am one of those small government, low-tax people. Yes, excuse me, please, Tea Party. But at what cost? What's the cost of that? That's what I have to consider. We also have to remember that we have what's called the law of unintended consequences, no matter what we do. Sometimes we do not know the unintended consequences until we act. We are beginning now to see some of that law of unintended consequences. The people of Norwood are scrambling to figure out how to get out of this, how to form their own how to form their own political entity. Is that what we wanted when we indulged in this? To cause angst in another part of our community? I don't think so. Another thing that bothers me about the process is our lack of assuredness. Will we not have trash collection? Yeah, we'll have trash collection, because we are already taxed separately for that. Well, we call it a fee, but it's a tax. Will we have water and sewer? Yes, we'll have water and sewer. The way it is now, because we're already paying for that. Will we have police protection? I don't know. Will the state police come to our aid? I don't know. Eventually. Will the county sheriff's department come to our aid? I don't know. I guess eventually. Keeping in mind the county is already talking about reducing road patrols. I live on a quiet street. We like to call it a cul-de-sac. It's a dead end. I have college kids who live across from me on Lawrence Avenue. Quietest college kids in this community. You don't even know they're home. Will that change without police protection? I don't know. There's the problem. I don't know. We have seen examples in the affordable health care program with I don't know. Remember Nancy Pelosi said you have to pass it before you get to know what's in it? Is that what we want to do now? Do we want to pass this now before we know what's in it? Should not we have assuredness? In reality, we can't have assuredness because we cannot commit the town to making those decisions. Therefore, to my way of thinking, it's a bad idea. We've heard that the village board, and I've served on boards before, and I want to thank you for serving on a board. Having done this before, it's no fun. The only time you get to have a party serving on a board is when you get off the board. They give you a plaque and say, have fun.
Look forward to that, George.
But the board cannot tell us, by virtue of the way it's constructed, that we will have these things. So instead, why don't we look at the people we elect to the board? And I am making no disparaging comments about anyone, because I've had my share of disparaging comments made. I know what it's like. Why don't we elect those people who serve our will on the village board and on the town board? If we are saying they don't get along, let's show up at village board meetings, at town board meetings, and say, hey, get along. We elected you to do this. Look at you people here tonight. You realize half this number, a quarter of this number would fill a boardroom and make a point? This is participative democracy. We get to choose what people do. If we are dissatisfied with the quibbling between the boards, then let's change the boards. Doing away with this particular level of government does not solve our problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Ma'am?
My name is Revzi, and I served on the Dissolution Committee, and I just would like to clarify a few points that were made tonight, and then offer just a few thoughts. The first one is on the amount of savings that is projected that the village residents would have, that's projected in the study. And I think somebody had said they thought it was just $3 difference. But if you look at that page in the document, right now, village taxpayers pay $17.25 worth of taxes. That includes their town portion. And the projection is that it would go down to around $11. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what it is, and that's with the aid or without the aid. So the savings is a bit more than was given. Yes, the town taxes are also projected to go up. And again, these are just projections. No one knows what will really happen. The other point I want to speak to is often people are talking about loss of services. As it was clarified by Mr. Hanlon, water and sewer is paid beyond that. Trash pickup is paid beyond that. I think the biggest service that we sometimes think about, fear of losing, is police protection. I guess I just want to point out just some ways of thinking about this. The colleges, the hospital, the schools, and the churches, most of them, happen to be within the village limits. If those colleges were in the town limits, if it had been the other way, this whole village-town thing would look very different. 30% of the village residents pay for that police service that benefits so many people. The police don't just benefit the people who live in our village. We all want police protection. At no time serving on this committee have I ever heard any of the town board members say that they don't want some form of police protection to continue. What will it look like? We're not sure because there are so many variables, but I don't think anybody envisions a Potsdam with no police protection. What it does do is open up the opportunity for contracts to be renegotiated. which can't be done right now very easily. Another question I want to just address is that of guarantees. As far as I know in life, there aren't too many guarantees. Yes, we can't hold a town board in the future to make the decisions that are in that plan. But as Mr. Hanlon said, this is a democracy. We can go to those meetings. We can speak our minds. When the town needs to represent former village residents, they will. Because right now it doesn't always feel that the village residents are part of the town, even though we are. There are no guarantees that with a 2% tax cap that now faces us, the village can continue to provide the services that it provides. There's no guarantee that they'll be able to keep our police protection at what it is, that we'll keep the services that we have. If we can't raise our taxes much more than they are. I think it's a look at shifting taxes, looking at maybe one community. That's my other point, is one of governance. This is all about, for many people, not an issue of taxes. It's an issue of redefining who Potsdam is, or what Potsdam is. Good life and integrity is not confined to the village. An economic plan and a viable downtown is not confined to just benefiting people who live in the village. It's a shift. It's a lot of shift. Will it be hard? Will it be awful? I don't know, but I guess I came into this not sure where I was with this issue, and I'm starting to feel not that this necessarily will be a bad thing, but it could be a very good thing. Do we know? I don't have that crystal ball. Could it all backfire? Could it be awful? Maybe, but I think we have so many good people in this community with so many good ideas that it doesn't necessarily have to go that direction if we don't want it to. They're just thoughts to have, just as counter arguments as many I've heard tonight. Will bickering still happen? Of course, but it'll all just be on one board now. You will always have bickering. You'll always have different viewpoints, and they always need to be heard to come to a better place. Are we big enough to really justify two governments? Are we big enough, or have we changed? Have our needs changed as a village? It used to be a village had its own specific needs. Is that still true today? I mean, are our needs really different than those who live in the town? Zoning won't go away. Those beer blasts, the students who live 2 doors down from me, I still want to be able to call somebody to have, to stop, to control the noise. And I feel those codes will still be there to reflect the needs of more densely populated places. Our history won't go away. We have our history. Our neighborhoods won't go away. We still have our neighbors. Just some other thoughts to maybe put the whole thing in a little bit more positive light than what I've heard tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else wishes to speak? Sir?
Good evening. My name is John Andercott. I've lived here all my life. My mom and dad and my brother Steve, we've lived here all our lives in the village of Potsdam. I remember I was walking down from Lawrence Ave when I was living out in Lawrence Ave with my mom, and Mr. Garner was still alive. Ruth's husband, dear husband, was still alive. And I was kind of low and kind of down, and something he told me stuck in my mind. I thought I should bring it tonight to the board, because Ruth would like this. I don't even know if George ever told Ruth this. He said, John, as I was down, I was kind of bad mood, and he said to me, John, don't ever give up on Potsdam. And he thought I was giving up on Potsdam. I don't know what drew him to that conclusion, but he said that to me, and it's always stuck out. And I said, I've got to bring that up tonight, because it's been going through everybody who's been here and all. We have college students, and I kind of get sometimes upset with the college students that was brought up here earlier. But one of the things at St. Mary's, I belong to St. Mary's Parish, of course, the college students from SUNY Potsdam and Clarkson are beautiful students. We had a welcoming back picnic for our college students yesterday, and they're very nice people. They love their faith. They come to the picnic we had. They had a good time, and they help at St. Mary's during the year, and we're always glad to see them welcome. It's the same way, like in the Village. I'll walk around, some college students will say hi to me and what have you. And the ones there that are here to earn their degrees, we want to see them come, and they're a big help to the community, and they bring in revenue, they bring in the whole thing, and it's good to see them. My fault about, I'm kind of up at arms because I've read so many things about the dissolution of the Village. Ron, this is not easy for me, so. But anyhow, I don't know, I have mixed feelings. But like I say, I care very much about my village. And like Ruth's husband said it really, John, don't you give up on the Village of Potsdam. He really said that. And that made a point to me, and he said that a long time ago, and I had to bring that up, Mayor, and so I wanted to let you know on the board, but thank you for your work and all, and I know a lot of you, and you work very hard and on Monday nights when you do have your meetings, and I want to thank you for your service to the community, and I wouldn't like to see that go. No offense to our supervisor who's sitting here, the town supervisor, but no offense to Maureen. I know Marie will love her very much too. But I feel that should be said tonight. And I thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you. Who else wishes to speak? Anyone?
My name is Mary Evans-Welpe, and I live on Waverly Street. And I was sitting here thinking I'm not going to talk. But we've talked a lot about college students. We've talked a lot about moving in, economics, bickering. And I just want to say, one of the things that when we bought our house in the Village, we looked at the services that we could have in the Village. I didn't want to deal with a septic tank. But, honest to God. But living in the Village gave us police protection, and not from college students. But when my father was living with us, they were the first responders anytime we needed him. When my father went out for walks on Halloween at midnight, they were the ones that brought him home. And if we can't guarantee that kind of support, then I can't support Dissolution.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? No one? Okay, if not, we'll invite Mr. Wood back up.
Thank you, Bob Burns and others, for reminding me to show proper respect to the board and to the audience. I got a little worked up before, because you see, I deal with elected officials all the time. I started a career in 1974 in the New York State Legislature as a staff person. And I worked for a bunch of state legislators, and I've worked with state legislators and with members of Congress ever since. And I always believed that public service is the highest calling and the most difficult one. And to explain, I could only last 6 years at it. I was a staffer in the state senate, and I would go to public hearings, some of which had New York City policemen at them, and we were God happy that they were there, because they made sure we got in safe and we got out safe. It was a slightly different place when you were trying to close down one of the largest landfills in America. And other boroughs were going to get the waste that went to Staten Island. So again, I understand where you are, and those of you who've served more than 6 years, you have my respect, and I will modulate my tone. But I also know that life, as a very well put statement by one of the Dissolution Committee members said, has no guarantees. And I ask you to take a look at the lessons of history, specifically the Berlin Wall. What guarantees did the people of East Germany have when that wall came down? What guarantees did they have about policing in their town of Potsdam, Germany? They didn't have many. What guarantees did the people that settled this area have when they came north and there were Indians and others around here? Well, let's look back on both. The government of East Germany demonized democracy and tried to make their people think that it was the worst thing possible to have democracy. And I think there's been a little demonization here of the town board and what they will and won't do. And I think there's been some the other way too. These are Americans. These are people from Potsdam. Let's have a little faith in the bonds that tie us. The country where I was born, Canada, is not some place a whole lot different, but it's different in a few ways. And I'll illustrate one or two and then stop. When I say we're competing with the rest of the world, I'm being truthful. Ontario has, rather than a home rule tradition as New York, where the localities are all powerful, believe it or not. That's the way the Constitution of the state reads. It's the provincial government. And the provincial government regularly consolidates and dissolves communities to make larger communities to get critical mass. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what they did in Ottawa was they took a bunch of warring little communities and they put them together. And what Ottawa has done with that is they now have the revenue base to support a professional economic development team that goes out and actively recruits clean energy businesses, and they're now the software center of Canada. Can't we work together under one government to get critical mass, to get the kind of revenue strength we need to make this a better place? Yes, we have a history in the Village of Potsdam, but the same way we don't fight our wars with the flintlocks that made the revolution and won it against the British. We fight with the weapons and tools and computers, etc., that are available now. I ask you, I've heard that Trustee Ugardis is concerned about the impending problem of public employee pensions. And when that hits, can a community that's 75% tax exempt, is it structurally capable of surviving? It's a legitimate question. Sometimes you have to look beyond things. I say to the town supervisor, I'm a town resident too. And these people are asking you, what's going to happen to the police department? We need a strong police department. What's going to happen on some of these other things? You and your colleagues on the town board, as we respect these people, we respect you. But please, your your electorate in the Village of Potsdam is asking you to do the responsible thing and answer us. What are you going to do with the police? What are you going to do on services? Can you not answer those? Give some indication? I think you can. And I'll be at your next board meeting to encourage you.
Okay, Mr. Wood, we're running low on time again.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your service.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Good evening. I'm Heather Sullivan-Catlin. I live on Market Street in the Village. And several years ago, I served on a Tax and Services Equity Committee. And I came away from that experience in favor of dissolving the village. And I have been on the fence of late, but I feel that Rose's comments and Will Siegfried's letter in the This Week are closer to where I'm thinking about this right now. In part because I can't get away from this thing that's been nagging at me since I moved to Potsdam, which was when I came here in 2000 and wanted to live in Potsdam, both for my employment and the quality of life here. The realtors who took me around encouraged me to consider living where, do you suppose? To get the best of both worlds. The amenities of the quality of life of living in Potsdam and the cheaper taxes of living outside the village. Our own realtors are pushing people out of the village. I don't know the exact split in population right now, but it doesn't make any sense to me that we have a separate village and another layer of town outside government for the current circumstances. It seems like what has happened here is that over the years, similar to what's happened in larger urban areas with white flight and so on, people have fled the center, as we've had with suburbanization, and left the fewer people in the middle where the quality of life elements are, the amenities, the culture, the education, the medical services, etc., holding the bag. And this is why we're here tonight, why we've come to this point over years of committees trying to see, is it equitable? Our committee found it wasn't equitable, that there were people living in the town outside the village who weren't paying their fair share of the amenities of living in our community. And so the idea of becoming one community, tussling on one board over the various issues and interests makes a great deal more sense to me. I do not want to lose our economic development, our services in the village. There are reasons to have them, I think, where there are higher population densities and many other reasons, but I think people would do well to consider the split in population and the equity of the way we all pay for the quality of life we have in Potsdam. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, who is next? Anyone else wish to speak? Mrs. Reagan.
Good evening. I'm Marie Reagan. I'm the town supervisor. I too had vowed that I for once would not open my mouth tonight. But I feel that too many people are asking the same question that my friend Rob Wood asked about why the supervisor and the town board don't say what will happen if dissolution does occur. It's very simple. If dissolution is the result of the election, we will be as we are now, one town. One town that had a village of Potsdam that no longer exists, but still has the town outside and the citizens who were in that old village, and the village of Norwood. The Dissolution Committee has worked long and hard and looked at all the services that they provide and decided pretty much that all of those services are essential. As an individual, I can't imagine this community without some type of police presence. But how can I or the town board say to you now with certainty what that police presence will be? I would imagine if dissolution happened, the very first thing I would do would be to set up one or two people to visit the legislature, to talk to our officials, to see if we could possibly create a police district. But the fact of the matter is, in this atmosphere, with consolidation being the byword of the present state government, I think the chances of that happening are not good. They don't want more layers of government. They don't want districts. They want larger entities. They think it will be more efficient and less expensive. I don't think that's always the case. Another reason that I can't speak to that issue is that the town board, regardless of what some people have said here, has always been comprised not only of people from Norwood and the town outside, but a Village of Potsdam residents. Whether you know it or not, we've always had one, sometimes two people from the village. Mrs. Revzi is running for the town board. She's in the village. She will be replacing somebody who is retiring, who lived in the town outside, unless she has some opposition, which I don't see yet. So we have always represented the entire town. But the town board that exists right now will not be the same after November. We have people retiring, and we have new people coming in. Regardless of what some of you may think, I am not the spokesperson and the decision maker alone. It's the entire board with input from the public. And after examination of facts and much colloquy and sometimes dissension, which is called bickering, the decisions finally are arrived at. And so how could I speak to what will happen 13 months from now when we don't have all of the facts yet at our disposal? It's not because we're trying to be evasive or uncooperative. It's because it would be presumptuous of me and the board to say what will happen when the board will be different and when the entire township has not had a chance to weigh in on these. Mr. Hanlon and several people have talked about, Mr. Bradford, about the unfairness of a decision being made that's going to dictate change to a larger community. And that is a true fact. That's a true fact. So if dissolution is the result of the vote, we're going to cope with it. We're going to do the best we can. But that will be the time when more people will be in the mix. And the entire community, which will be defined a little differently, but still will be the same community of people who care about Potsdam, who care about what happens culturally, economically, agriculturally, and every other way, will work together to make this the best place it can be. I pledge that to you, and I don't think any of you should worry about that. This has been a very trying year and a half, I've tried to hold my tongue, which isn't very easy for me. I have come out maybe a little previous to some others that I am not for dissolution for a couple of reasons. Too many unknowns, and maybe it's not necessary. You talk about bickering and dissension. I've been on the town board and as deputy supervisor and now supervisor 16 years. For a lot of you, that's too damn long. I'd like to think that I'm running unopposed this time because I do a good job, but my head tells me nobody else wants the job. Okay? I'll do my best, but my point I'm trying to make is this. There is a perception that there is deep division and a divide between the village and the town governments. That's not true. We talk loud. We have different ideas. But as Mr. Burns says, in most cases, we have come to compromise. He stated the recreation, inequity in funding. There still was a question, should we do it by assessment or should we do it by population? But now we're paying 50%. Our crews help pave. Our crews lend equipment. The village has worked with us in many ways. We have put in money together for the fire truck, the new fire truck that was in the wonderful ceremony we had yesterday with the Elks, celebrating 9/11, remembering all the heroes that were part of that. There's really only one issue that's still contentious, and that has to do with annexation. No water and sewer unless you annex into the village. And the town feels that we can't give away all of our property or we won't be able to pay our fair share of the services that we have in common. The village feels that that would be a threat. They don't want that. Those things have to be worked out. And it is difficult for development unless we can settle that amicably through compromise. It'll happen. It has to. And it can be done without dissolution. Forgive me for speaking so long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Sir?
Hi, my name is Jack McGuire. I live at 9 Poplar Street. I need to make at least one statement about a couple of mistakes that have been made sort of having to deal with government issues. Number one is that the village voters would not and cannot increase the taxes of people in the town. So that's a clarification. A couple of people have alluded to the fact that village folks would actually be, in a sense, disenfranchising those in the town, and that's just simply something that cannot happen. As we all know, we vote for our village trustees, the folks up here, but then we also vote for the people on the town. And that any plan that is subsequently voted on would be voted on by town officials. So if you live in the town, you have a choice this November or in the future of either having folks like my friend Marie here remain on that board or send her on her way. Okay? Which of course, I like you, Marie. So, and then the other thing is that it's also quite presumptuous to say that the state legislature would not agree to having a special district for police. I mean, particularly since a lot of at least some of the reasons for that decision on the village dissolution committee, of which I was a part, was premised on the information from a freshman assembly person from Canton. And so I think that is highly skeptical. And then the second thing is with that is that the governor is more interested, and the state is more interested in reducing the number of general purpose governments, not single purpose governments. which a police district would be. So they want to remove the number of layers like a village or a town, where actually if we lived in a state like Indiana, you could actually have, we would probably be better off having the village and then doing away with town government. But we don't have that option in this state. So we're left with this sort of public discussion about what we want to do in the future. So those are just a couple of clarifications that I wanted to make. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Who's next? I think the gentleman here was next.
I'd first like to thank the Village Board for holding this meeting tonight. I really appreciate it. My name is Matthew Flynn, and I'm a student here at Clarkson University. Throughout this evening, I've heard a lot of discussion about students and about economic development, and I thought that I would like to present a point of view from a student here. Here at Clarkson and at SUNY Potsdam, the students are very fortunate to be in a position where both universities have great job placement. Very seldomly do I talk to a peer of mine who's a senior, second semester, who has not been offered numerous jobs. A couple weeks we have a career fair coming up. We have employers from across the country coming to recruit our students to hire them. But there's one problem with that. The jobs, they're not here. I've lived in the North Country for most of my life, and I know other individuals who have lived here for most of their life, who have gone to school up here, who have gotten very reputable degrees, and who cannot find jobs up here, who are forced to leave northern New York because of a lack of jobs. Our greatest resource for a long time now has been our young people. Now, when you talk about economic development, when you talk about what the municipalities are doing, one thing that I noticed earlier was a discussion of the decrease in taxes for the village. And little quick math, it's somewhere around 30%. Somewhere around 30%. Now, if I was a business owner and I wanted to bring a business here, which it makes sense with all the schools that we have here, it makes sense to bring an engineering firm, to bring maybe an art firm, to bring some type of firm that can benefit from the students who have been here for the last 4 years and who want to continue living here. However, would a 30% decrease in taxes be an incentive to bring a business here? I'm not sure about that, but I believe that lowering the taxes in this area and opening up the opportunity for businesses to come here would benefit this area. Now, the issue of police coverage has been discussed. I am very grateful for the police coverage that we have here as a college student, and there's not a doubt in my mind that regardless of what happens, we will maintain adequate police coverage here. As stated by our town supervisor, she supports having police coverage here. If we have a town board that strongly believes that we need to have a police force here, there will be one. There will be one. And that is one of the great things about democracy, is that if the people strongly advocate for something and they strongly believe in something, it will happen. Now, there's talk about the state, about what the state's going to do, about what they're not going to allow us to do. What did this community do when the state wanted to close Ogdensburg Correctional Facility? What happened then? I know many correction officers who are still working there because the people stood up, they advocated for an issue they believed in, and the elected officials in Albany heard them. When discussing these issues, there's a lot of questions. But please, as a student of the local community here, regardless of if we continue with or without a village, we need to remember when discussing economic development, the lack of jobs up here and the difficulties that it is causing for our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Mark Lee, and I live on Chestnut Street. I was also a member of the Village Dissolution Committee. I just wanted to clarify 3 points. One point is about a police district. The major savings that one sees by the dissolution plan are premised on the idea of creating a town-wide police force. So if one were to create a police district, those savings would be lost. So the taxes would basically remain the same in the village, because the main savings would be because of renegotiation of police contracts and spreading the costs out to the town. The other thing I think is really important for us to realize is that if we dissolve the village, we lose the gross utilities receipts tax. Now, this is not an enormous amount. I think it's about $130,000 a year. But that can only go to villages. It cannot go to towns under state law. And you and I pay, as village residents, we pay this tax. Okay, that's about 2% on our electric bill. But Clarkson and the hospital and Potsdam College also pay that 2%. So even though there are tax-exempt properties, it is one way in which taxes are collected from them that help to fund the village. And as I said, that money would be lost in perpetuity. And number 3 is I have to agree with Mrs. Reagan that there have been issues between the village and the town, and annexation is obviously one of the major issues at present. But I think there are creative solutions that can be worked out whereby, you know, there may be some cost sharing or some tax things. But I mean, I think it's an ongoing discussion. And I think that's one of the beauties of this dissolution process has been where people from the village and the town have been working together on committees. And I think rapport has been developed. And I think that's been a very positive thing. And last but not least, I do think there are different interests in that many people in the town have from people in the village. One person said they don't want to have a septic tank. Well, I don't necessarily want to have a septic tank either, but a lot of people are more than happy to have a septic tank and their own well and pretty much be as independent as possible and therefore pay less taxes, while maybe people like myself who want to live in the village and want these services are willing to pay a little bit more in taxes. And thank you for your time, too.
Thank you. Pam?
Michelle Arnold, on the Dissolution Committee and Chair of the Subcommittee for Police. I just wanted to make a few clarifications. As Mark just alluded to, he was also on the subcommittee. The police district, although no one has done a police district since 1934, nobody knows exactly how that will go. So that there are more unknowns than knowns about the police district. And as based on those last year's budget, everything, all the projections in the dissolution report was based on last year's budget. And all the information, all the fact-finding was based on both the town and the village last year. But based on that, if we were to get a police district, which was one of the options from the police subcommittee, it wasn't the option that we recommended, but if we were to get it, it would be the closest resemblance to the current village police. But people must realize that there are unknowns, and also, as it stands with the projections, it could actually raise the former village's taxes. So if you live in the village, you dissolve, and now you're the former village. If you have a police district, you will probably have similar, almost apples to apples service, but you could actually end up paying more. When I've discussed it with our consultant, it would be more, but maybe the town would figure out a way to at least break even. It wouldn't be paying more than we are now. So that definitely won't be a savings. However, a police district, would satisfy a lot of town outside village residents who don't seem to want to change their current law enforcement. And the other thing is, when people talk about police, you're talking the presence of police, you're talking about response time, although everyone's not saying response time. One citizen, village resident, made a comment about that. But that's usually what you're talking about, because it's not as if it'll be a lawless Potsdam. However, with possible county cuts and reasons why the sheriff and the state troopers cannot enforce local village codes, there would be reasons that that is not the first choice, and it wasn't the first choice of the subcommittee. As far as the first choice of the subcommittee, it was a townwide police force, and it would have to be townwide for it to be legal, and that means that when we made that recommendation, although it's the same size force for the whole town, and it sounds ludicrous, it kind of made us look foolish, but we were advised by the consultant that for the purposes of this dissolution study, the report, we could not increase that. And in fact, the town representative on our subcommittee said that, this has been mentioned before, that no way could he stand behind an increase because he would have to go to the people who elected him, meaning the town outside the village residents, and explain how he was going to increase the police, and consequently the taxes would go up. And there was one other thing. No, there isn't one other thing. That's it. I covered them all. It's all about the police subcommittee that I wanted to talk, but I'm just happy that so many people spoke. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Sir? Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? No one? Last call. I've heard that before. Okay, I guess just a couple of quick comments. First of all, a lot of thank yous to the folks at Clarkson for letting us be here tonight, providing all the assistance, the technical assistance. Channel 7 was here, they left. Thank you to them. To Mr. Dullea and his staff, great job. To Mr. Dustin and WPDM Radio for being here. But most of all, to you folks for being here. I think, you are guiding us, hopefully in the right direction. I think without you, excuse me, we couldn't make an informed decision. It's going to be a tough decision. Lost a lot of sleep over it, lost some hair. But I think it's going to happen with your help. We need all of you folks, and the more times you can come to our meetings and give us some guidance, some information, the more we appreciate it. We do have a village board meeting next Monday night at 7 p.m. in the Civic Center boardroom. I believe there's a town meeting tomorrow night in the town hall at 7 p.m. as well, 6:30. Please feel free to attend and voice your opinions. Without your opinions, we can't make these decisions. Without you folks, we're not here. But also want you to know that we're here for you. Thank you very much, and with that, I'm going to close the hearing.